Assalamu alaikum. Hi, hello everyone. So today's our first talk in our series of talks. So last Monday we had our social, of course, and it was nice to see everyone. Today's our first talk. So every Monday we'll have a talk from a guest. It won't be as interactive or as intensive as the workshops. It will be a talk and an opportunity for a Q&A and discussion. So today we have the honor of hosting, he doesn't like me saying doctor, but it's Dr. Imran Mahmud, who's a good friend to Udine developers and who has many accolades. So he's a medical doctor from Oxford, also spent some time at Harvard as a scholar, ex-McKinsey, co-founder of a well-valued startup, and many, many other things alongside being a father. So one of the things I asked him, and I've benefited a lot from him directly, is on managing expectations, managing time, managing obligations, whilst excelling in all such things. So I thought it would be a nice topic for Imran to talk about, and we've titled it Surviving as a Founder. So I'll just hand it over to you, Imran. You can introduce yourself as well anyway, if you like, and then we'll spend about, I think you said about half an hour on the presentation, and then we'll spend the last half hour or so on a Q&A.
Sounds good. Jazakallah khair, Tahseen. Yeah, I guess first of all, someone online wrote something recently that is quite relevant just now that I thought I'd mention. And they said, as they were thinking about what they wanted to do for the rest of their lives, one question they asked themselves was, how can I become the person that I needed when I was younger, or at that, some pivotal stage in my own journey? And I think what you and the team have done with Dean Developers is exactly that. You've created a space for early stage founders to come together, to support each other, to learn from each other, and to widen the conversation with the mentors and everybody else that's involved. So I just want to, say, thank you for doing that service for the community. And I myself have already benefited a lot from being a part of the program. So this session is, it's a topic that I really do actually care a lot about, because I think that, it's no secret that founders face a particular and unique type of challenge. If you speak to anyone who has founded a company, there's usually a kind of, when you see war veterans, there's a kind of like solidarity that they tend to have with one another. I think because there's a recognition that founding a company is so challenging. And it is definitely, at least from my experience, the hardest thing I've ever done professionally. Has pushed me regularly to the limits of my capabilities and far beyond. So I think, creating a space to talk about some of those themes is, for me, it's something that I really value. It feels like a really important thing to do. So I start with this slide, which is that there's a kind of paradox in being a founder. And hopefully the point of this is to sort of get you all thinking about your own experience. But you have to be unreasonably committed. You have to have an unrealistic expectation about what can actually happen. It was once described to me as like throwing a ball in the air and expecting that ball should keep rising and rising until it leaves the atmosphere. That's what starting a company is like. It's against all of the odds, against market forces, incumbents, your own indecision or inertia, and so on and so forth. So it's a really challenging thing. So you have to be like overcommitted. You have to be over involved. You have to think about it a lot, even when you're not in your kind of formal work mode. It's a natural thing that happens to founders. But at the same time, those same traits can actually lead to problems. And that's why I think it's almost like a catch-22 situation. So I don't have the answer. And I've certainly been through my own experiences where, faced many challenges. And I think part of my process of dealing with it is to keep having this type of conversation with other people, to make myself aware, to make other people aware of the types of things to look out for. So that's just kind of a starting thought, really. And to go sort of into the conversation itself, I guess, from my point of view, this slide, this discussion, this session is about keeping yourself well as an individual. So I'll share some lessons. I'll share some things that I've done and I've found useful for me as a founder in my own experience. I can share some personal stories. There are some resources that are linked in the deck as hyperlinks. You'll see them pop up here and there, which I think are just useful things to check out. Inshallah, the team can make that available after the session. And the focus is on early stage founder well-being. So this is about the kind of 0 to 1 stage or thereabouts. What this isn't about is surviving as a founder in terms of like how to survive in a specific role or how to survive in a specific company, like to stay in the company if you're facing challenges. It's not about that. And it's also not a recipe. It's not intended to be like, this is how you do it. It's to create space for the conversation, and everybody will have to figure it out for themselves. So we did a very quick introduction, but essentially, well, I'll just kind of skip over that because I think Tassin mentioned. Maybe the only thing I'll add to it is I think the bit about like having a family and so on seems to be something that comes up a lot in conversations, and people often ask like, how do you manage it if you have children, or how do you balance family with work, deal with competing these competing demands on your time and so on. And you can replace family with anything else. It can be your nuclear family, like, or parents, siblings, other responsibilities you have, or whatever else is going on in life. So we can go deep on that. If you ask questions, I might go on about that a bit because I think about it a lot. So I'll share the first half of the session. We'll have a bit of a conversation, and then what I'll do is, I know that, we'll see how people feel and like how open people feel asking questions. You can ask me any question in this session. If you want to ask questions or like relate to a personal experience you're going through or a challenge, from my point of view, that's fine. See how you feel. You're very welcome to, but I want it to feel a bit more like a discussion for the second half. Okay, so keeping yourself well. Here we go. I don't know if anyone has heard this quote, but it's sort of done the rounds on the internet a bit, which is that starting a company is akin to eating glass or chewing glass and staring into the abyss. It's torturous, it's hard, and you're kind of staring into adversity. You're staring into loss, or like, there's a million different ways it sometimes feels that a startup can go wrong, but the way that it goes right feels very elusive. And, this is the reason I put this here is to sort of give me and to give us all permission to say that it's hard. Recognizing and acknowledging that you're doing something that takes courage. It takes, a certain appetite for risk taking. There are many entrepreneurs that could quite easily exchange their startup work for a stable job. Let somebody else figure out how to bring the revenue in. Let somebody else figure out the compliance, the data, all the kind of complicated, the legals, all of the things that surface when you're running your own company, that when you work in a larger company, you don't sort of realize that somebody else is taking care of that. And with startups in particular, the classic challenges that people face, it's all of the usual stuff, long hours, lots of stress and responsibility. As companies grow, people often say that it's the people that sometimes gets complicated, managing people's expectations, their demands, and so on. And dealing with people, as companies grow, that may have very different incentives or very different motivations. You've got investors who will look at your company from one point of view. You've got co-founders that are incentivized in a unique way. You've got employees, you've got customers, you've got competitors. And then you've got like just malicious actors out there in the world. I'm sorry to say, when you become a big company, there are people out there that will target you in ways that, seem really unethical and illegal, like ransomware, all that kind of stuff. So you're setting out on this journey, which is riddled with all of these mines and hazards and all of these things. So it's important to be mindful of that, because that sort of sets the stage for a lot of what I'm going to talk about. And this is not science. So a lot of what I say is just about my personal beliefs. And a core part of that is around, having the right expectations, about preparing well, about supporting each other as a community, even outside your company, which is critically important, having people around you. So we'll talk a little bit about those themes. So I couldn't resist a framework. I've sort of worked back into this where I thought to myself, what are the like 3 things that I could use to just give people something to hang their hat on, or as a kind of, aid memoir as you go out of this session and you jot something down, or you're sort of thinking back, like, what are the things that are easy to remember? And at the highest level, and this is kind of meant to resemble a bit of a Maslow's hierarchy, where at the top, there's a kind of self-actualization. There's something which is bigger than yourself, right? There's something which is the dream, the ideal, the realization, as it is in the Maslow's hierarchy. And that's your purpose. It's like, why are you doing this? And that's not a one and done. It's not like a slide in your pitch deck. which then goes like, into a Google Drive recess. You need to have a sense of purpose to kind of sustain yourself. It's the same, in our faith and in everything else that we do in our lives. Purpose really matters. Thinking about why you're doing something is really important because it keeps your ship on a steady course when the seas get rough. The second is about the relationships. It's sort of the kind of like, if the first one is the kind of vertical, it's sort of the thing that goes up and in an ascendant way. The second piece is the sort of horizontal, which is like how you relate to the people around you and how you leverage relationships and those support networks to keep yourself well. I have personally found that incredibly important. It's one of the, if there's like a trade-off with having a young family as a founder, obviously the challenges everybody knows about. But if I were to say something about the benefits, just like to give a personal experience, being able to like step out of my this room and go and pick up the children or do something that just gets me out of that headspace, for me, that's an important part of the relationships that keep me well as a founder. We'll talk about other kinds in a little while. And then the bottom one is the kind of like, the bottom of Maslow's hierarchy. It's the kind of really fundamental stuff. People joke that these days it's Wi-Fi at the bottom or coffee, but it's sort of like security, safety, and what I call it is process, right? It's about having a personal system, because I'm a firm believer. Again, this is just like Imran's view of the world to take with a handful of chicken tikka masala. But my view is that the results that you get in life, they are ultimately the result of a process and discipline, and or sticking to something that works for you. So we'll work our way down and sort of try and understand how these all fit together. If anyone has any questions, by the way, just feel free to just speak up, or if you want to type them. Tessin, if I miss a question, just chip in and let me know. I'm not actually monitoring the chat as we go. Yeah, so the why is really important, and there's some tactical reasons why the why. This is going to get confusing, isn't it? There's some tactical reasons why the why is important, but people say things like, when it comes to hiring, when it comes to fundraising, having something that people can really believe in, having a story, having a narrative, having a kind of dream that people can buy into, is really important for people to believe in you and back you, either with their time and their financial resources, or whatever it may be. But even like more fundamental than that is that, you'll face all kinds of struggles. You probably are already up against all kinds of struggles. And I think the why is really important. In some cases, I'm working with a couple of the businesses here at the moment, and we've talked about that in some of our sessions about the importance of the work that's being done, the impact you're trying to have on the world. So that's sort of like, I've always found it's like a compass, and it sort of guides you when you don't know where you are, or you feel a bit lost, or you feel like you've had a setback. And you have to build on that over time. Like, as I said, it's not just about a pitch deck, but people that are able to connect with the why, they're able to derive energy and motivation and resilience from their sense of purpose. And I think that's the case in anybody who performs at a high level in any discipline, whether it's sport or business, social work, family, faith, whatever it may be. That's critically important. And you have to build that over time. You have to nurture that. You have to feed it. And you have to get comfortable talking about it, and you have to start to believe it. And I think in the beginning, I certainly found something, which is that the why I felt like a fraud talking about the why, because it was so lofty. It was so like unattainable. And it's not like our startup has sort of cracked that, but that's why I think it's important to build on it, because you have to keep nurturing that conviction inside you that actually you're still going after this goal that means so much to you. And then the last bit about recognizing the importance of the journey, essentially what I'm trying to say there is that when you set yourself up with a goal, it can feel like if you don't achieve that goal of removing all carbon from the atmosphere, whatever it may be, then you're a failure. You sort of like sacrificed yourself at the altar of carbon capture, and as a consequence, your life is like meaningless now because there's still carbon in the atmosphere or whatever. But the journey is an important part of that purpose. And companies often have like these unattainable visions for a future that you'd have to be in every market in the world and capture every customer, and maybe one of the accelerator companies, inshallah, will achieve that in their mission. But you know, even the biggest companies in the world haven't achieved that yet. So the journey is really important, and taking with every setback and with everything that you encounter, there's always a learning there. So I think just recognizing that if you have a setback, even if you have a failure, that you fail forwards. You know, when you read about entrepreneurs and people who are successful, if you look into all of their past, there's always a failure. I mean, even like Emma Raducanu, right, who won this US Open a couple of days ago, you don't have to look very far back into her history to see, you know, a really like miserable withdrawal from a huge competition. And there's something that must have happened in that failure that she failed forward. You know, she took that, whatever breathing difficulties that she had at Wimbledon, she took that forward into her preparation, and I'm sure she would have paid more attention to her mental resilience and all of that in the preparation for the US Open as a consequence. So these things become part of your story. The journey is an important part of getting to the why over, you know, over the long view of a career. So yeah, I'll move on to the second one now, which is the piece about like social relationships and people. And this is one that's been really important for me, particularly because I've changed my career and my discipline. And as you leave a scene, you have to rebuild. I have found I've had to rebuild community. I've had to find people and like befriend them and like reach out to them and, you know, feel that discomfort of like taking that social risk and talk to them and like ask them for help, ask people to be my mentor, ask people to be a sponsor, which is different to a mentor. It's just somebody who like helps you to find opportunities and pushes you towards them. I've had to go and I've, you know, even socializing, like, you know, trying to meet people for coffee or meet them for a meal, or in some cases invite them to my house and just like build relationships with people who are going to be my support network. So this is critically important because, you know, the ability to like make sense of challenge, a big part of that comes from tapping into the shared experiences of people around you. An investor is asking for something like crazy in your due diligence. How do you know that that's unreasonable, or how do you know that that's okay and it's just a formality? You have to ask people. You know, if a customer complains about something or gives you like a data subject access request or one of these things, you don't even know what that means. You know, what do you do with that? Like the first thing, you can pick up the phone and call a lawyer, but you'll be out of money in a few hours. You know, you want to be able to call upon your friends. You want to be able to ask people that have dealt with these things, because you'll be dealing with them for the first time. And I think one of the key things here is like really learning how to be a good friend, because I don't know about you, but like I never really, obviously we have ideas from our faith about like to be a good person, to have good character and so on. And we have the example of the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, and his companions. But in the modern day, like actually thinking in the internet era, like how do I be a good friend? What does that actually look like in practice? What are the rituals? What are the practices? Like how do I reach out to people? How do I offer support? What can I actually do to help someone in need? These types of things are not trivial. They're not obvious. So you have to learn how to be a good friend. And I'm sorry if this sounds really basic, but like there's something there, because you know, as you support people, that's how those bonds become stronger. And you know, all of this, to anyone who's like reads any of the Naval stuff on the internet, but one of the key themes that comes out of his lessons is about the like long-term nature of this game, whether it's like entrepreneurship or it's investing or, you know, establishing yourself or your company. And you know, relationships are one thing that actually become much stronger over the long term. They compound, a bit like financial investments, they can compound. So I am a real believer in this, that, you know, investing in relationships, supporting people. And what happens, I think, is that, you know, occasionally if you're a giver, you'll find someone that tries to take advantage of you. Like it will be a one-way relationship. That does happen obviously in the world, where people don't give, they just take. But on the whole, if you have a good relationship with somebody who's also a giver and you're supporting each other, something really magical starts to happen after a while. You know, 6 months, 12 months, 2 years, 3 years, 5 years, and before you know, after 10 years, these are the people who are, creating opportunities for you, or helping you, you know, when you're in a real pickle or whatever it may be. So I think that's a key thing. This is obviously a long-term game, and that's why it's so important. So just to kind of double click a bit on the second one about relationships, therapy is expensive. I wish everybody could support therapy. I could afford therapy. My co-founder and I did have couples therapy in our company, and we had like 6 sessions. Now we've raised several million pounds. You know, paying £140 an hour for couples therapy is like, when you figure out like your cash burn rate at that stage, is basically, you know, like minutes of the company's burn, or an hour or something. And it's really worth the investment. So if you're in a situation where you can informally get therapy, which is basically what a good friendship is, someone who listens, especially someone who knows how to be a good friend, they'll know how to listen. They won't overwhelm you with advice, maybe like I'm doing now. They'll sort of listen, and they'll like tease it out of you. They'll ask good questions, and they'll help you to come to your conclusions. So therapy is like that. And it's really, as soon as you raise external investment, I would say to all people, like, just think about spending some of that money on therapy. Get a good coach, team coach or founder coach, and spend time with them. You know, they'll help you to talk about the difficult issues. But a free approach is what I basically described. Build some networks, be a good friend to others, develop a win and let win attitude, which means that you think about life not as a zero-sum game, which is, you know, if I take opportunity from this person and pass it to this person, then there's less opportunity for the person that, you know, helped. Or if I give advice, like tell someone to speak to the investors I'm speaking to, then that investor won't have as much money in their pocket to like invest in my startup if they invest in my friend's. So try and break out of that zero-sum thinking and try and think about life in a win and let win mindset, which is, you know, helping people doesn't take away from anything that is for you. And I think as Muslims, like, you know, there are parables in our faith about, like, you know, a goodly deed and a return for a good deed, and helping and supporting and being sort of charitable in your mindset and helping other people. That, inshallah, this idea is actually quite an Islamic idea. But I think you will get a reputation for being a helpful person in the community if you do that, and you will compound opportunity that you attract as a founder, as a company, and so on. And, you know, talking about your problems, getting this external challenge, you know, think about journaling. These are all the types of things that if you read other founders who've written about these things, these are the types of things that they talk about. There's some hyperlinks there, so you can have a look at those articles later on. And then this is the final piece. And I'm sorry if this sounds like a tough message. My intent here is not to be like cruel, but just to be like straightforward, which is that, you know, your personal well-being, at the end of the day, the only person you can count on who will consistently support your personal well-being is yourself. You have to sort of get comfortable with that idea. And the reason I say that is like, you know, I've seen many people throughout the different work environments I've worked in the past, where they sort of like the company will just like take as much as they give, as the person gives. So if there's more work to be done, or there are more patients to see on the ward before you go home, even though you've been there for 3 hours over your shift, or you know, there's like another like document to prepare for a startup, or another line of code to write, or a tweak to a design, or whatever, your company will take as much as you give. And the only way that you can create boundaries is actually by owning that yourself, and, you know, actually making tough decisions to say, I'm going to draw a line here. So you know, that's part of sort of the tough reality of this deal, is that it's ultimately on your shoulders. And I don't say that to like crush someone that's already feeling under the cosh, but more to say, you know, you're empowered to help yourself. And we can talk the next few slides are sort of looking a little bit at what that might look like. So I'm going to keep this quite high level, and it might seem obvious, but I think oftentimes when these things break down, it's actually the basics that are breaking down. It's not that someone has like a PhD in calendar management and they've just like missed some like subtlety. It's usually something really fundamental that's going wrong. So figuring out like a process and approach that works for you is really important. Many people who are starting companies as their first jobs, I think it's particularly important in that instance, because you might not have had many opportunities to exercise those skills in environments that are like a bit less stressful than running your own company. So you have to be really careful about this. But the kind of headlines from my point of view are like, you know, how you manage your time, really, really important. There's some good articles on this. Some of them are linked at the bottom there. This one is also linked up here, The Manager versus Maker, which is a kind of classic by Paul Graham about like interruptions and how you create office hours and whatnot. Learning how to say no. And that's not just saying no to people outside, but it can be an internal thing as well. So creating the focus for yourself and for your team. And also learning what to let go of and what you should not be letting go of, like what you can delegate to other people or fires that you can let burn and the ones that you really mustn't. But don't fall into this trap of being like too busy to hire, too busy to fix a broken process, right? Obviously there's a judgment call there, but it's easy to like you boil a frog, as they say, you just kind of heat the water slowly, before you know it, the frog's cooked. And it won't jump out the water because it just got hotter and hotter in small increments. So you don't want to be that frog where you're sort of getting boiled because you didn't pay attention to this. And in each of your situations, the what that actually is, it will look slightly different. So this is just to kind of summarize that point. A startup is more than a job, but it's less than life. And if you've ever worked like a 9 to 5 or whatever it is these days, running a startup is not like that. You're in the shower, you're thinking about problems. You're on the weekend, you're thinking about problems. You're on the tube, you're thinking about problems. So you really do need to pay attention to this sort of thing. And I think one simple way you can do that is actually just look at how you're spending your time. If you decide that in order to stay well, the ingredients of staying well, by the way, are not rocket science. They're different for each person, but some combination of sleep, nutrition, movement and exercise, and like social, emotional connection with other people is some combination of that for most people, right? That encompasses basically all of keeping well from a physical point of view. So if you're thinking like, I want to make sure I'm getting out for a walk, at least taking one meeting a day, I'm walking, or I'm going to the gym, or I'm like socializing once a week, or I'm taking a day off a week, whatever it is, look at how you're spending your time, audit yourself. And that will give you an indication of how you're doing. And you do need to develop a system, right? The results that you achieve, whether it's your wellness, whether it's your productivity at work, your happiness to continue with your job, all of those things are ultimately a byproduct of your system. When I say system, I mean like your morning routine, your daytime routine, your evening routine, your weekly cadence, your monthly cadence, all of that stuff. So I'm going to share a few screenshots of like tweets and things that some friends of mine responded. I put some question out to a few of them about this, and I thought I just put them in here because they're kind of fun and they sort of reinforce some of these ideas, I think. So Shazad from Muzmatch, CEO of Muzmatch, very accomplished entrepreneur, awesome business. It's basically saying, he starts with this like candor. He's really candid. He's sort of saying, like, I know I'm crap at it, but that's why somebody like Shazad will keep learning and he'll keep getting better at it, because he's open with the fact that like it's a hard thing to do and he's still learning. So he won't assume it's like buttoned up and done. But he's talking here about learning how to get let go of stuff, and that being his challenge. His comfort zone is releasing certain things. And I think as founders, when it's very hard when you've done everything to then start letting other people do some of those things. And I think if you're a solo founder, it's even harder because you really probably have done everything. And then you slowly relinquishing things. And there's certain things that you shouldn't let go of, Shazad says here, which are things that can materially affect the direction of your business. And I presume there he's talking about things like, what the product should be, what market you should be in, what customers you should be going after, and what your go-to-market plan, those types of key things. One way that some founders do it actually is if they do have a bit of finance, like money to spend, is they'll set themselves an hourly rate. They'll say, okay, my time is worth £100 an hour or £200 an hour or £50 an hour, whatever it is. And with the things that they can outsource, if they can find someone to do it for less than that rate, they won't think about it. They'll just do it. They'll just hand it off, right? Because they've already done the return on investment calculation, which is that I shouldn't be doing reconciliation of receipts if I can do it for less than £100 an hour, or I shouldn't be doing like slide deck formatting if I can do it for less than £100 an hour, whatever the number is. So that's one way you can use it as a tool. It still takes discipline. That's one way to think about it. Now, Sahib, who's one of the participants here, Sahib says that time blocking is key. I think what Sahib's talking about here is basically, carving out time in your schedule to do things that are important, rather than necessarily just like maintaining a to-do list and a free calendar where things can kind of displace what needs to be done. So let's say, for example, you need to spend an hour on your pitch deck every day for, between, today's Monday and the end of the week. Actually scheduling that time in, blocking that time to say, when 3 o'clock comes, I'm going to sit down, I'm going to work on that pitch deck for an hour. It's that sort of discipline. It doesn't work for everyone. These things are very individualistic, but if it does work for you and you haven't tried it, then it's a good thing to sort of discover, as I found out. And I think Suhaib also talks about the clarity of vision. I think it's a great point when it comes to prioritization and focus, and also when it comes to sort of knowing what to let go of. Thank you, Suhaib. And then this is my friend Isa. Isa is comes from a very entrepreneurial background, but this is his first startup, healthcare startup, and he's basically talking about setting boundaries. And I think that's right. Like I've got another comment on the next slide that reinforces this, that I'm going to add here as well. Another friend of mine that's very good at this and the time blocking his name is Yusuf Ben Tarifite, and he's commented on some posts I put online and shared his process in some detail. I think it's on LinkedIn, where how he uses his calendar to block time. So this is the kind of thing that you learn when you talk, right? If you talk to people, back to the like second level of the pyramid, which is like, your support group, your relationships, this is the stuff that comes out. And people will share their tips. They may even share their like calendar screenshots to show you how they're splitting their time. Or they'll talk to you about how they make sure they get time with their kids, or they'll talk to you about how they exercise, in a time efficient way, whatever it is. So that's how this sort of stuff comes out. This is a friend of mine called Luke. He's the CEO of a company called Fella, just gone through YC. So Luke talks about sprints that have really helped him. So he used to think about work as a marathon. So he talked about like a 4-month period where he didn't take a day off, and he felt really exhausted and started making very short-term decisions by the end of it because he was just knackered. But now he thinks more about like his work as sprints. So he, if he's got something that he's building towards like a fundraise, that will be like an episode, like 4 weeks, 8 weeks, and then he'll make sure he takes a week off afterwards. So like a sprinter, he's like going at it and then he's having a rest. He's not just like sprinting around the track all day. And he also recommends taking time in your calendar and blocking it to protect it. And for him, a kind of marker that he's working too much and wearing himself down is if he works like a couple of weekends in a row. So he tries to kind of hold himself to account that way. So ultimately, these, if you were looking for a kind of elixir of like wellness, then you're probably not going to find it in this deck, because I think it's, for the simple reason that this is a tremendously personal, recipe that I recommend that, you actually block some time using the principles. You block some time to talk to your friends about, and no, jokes aside, like you actually block some time in your calendar to like, really take a look at this and think about what it means for you. If you haven't discovered what keeps you well, then you will have to experiment with that. And there are some really good books. So there's an author called Rangan Chatterjee. He's got a book called The 4 Pillars. He's an expert in he's a primary care doctor, but he's an expert in keeping yourself well. And he talks about the basics there, but he does a very good job of it. The other thing is like just paying attention to yourself to know how you're doing. And I think there's probably just a lot of low grade anxiety and fatigue out there after the pandemic. People in lockdown and so on, losing all of their support networks and whatnot. So it's a good time to sort of pay attention to that coming out of this recent period. So I'll stop there from the slides point of view, and then we can just have like a bit of a conversation. I don't know if people are able to like, if you want to send like a private message, I think in Zoom, you can do that either to one of the moderators or myself, and we can ask the question in an anonymous fashion, and so wherever you feel most comfortable.
I have a question.
Absolutely, yeah, Bismillah.
So what was your why?
So mine, I think they're, for me, yeah, that's again a very good question. The obvious one for the company was around improving, making it easier for patients to access healthcare from home or in a convenient way, so they don't have to interrupt the rest of their lives to go and, go to visit a doctor for something that doesn't need that. And making it easier essentially for people to get well as a consequence. We had a longer term vision, which was, if you can solve that problem, then people will share information with you, and that information will hold the key to helping them, to helping provide certain services for them that will help them get well. I think on a personal level, like, it's taken me a very long time to come to terms with this, but I think there's two other things. I think I probably have, I can't explain it, but I have some chip on my shoulder where, like, I have to prove something to myself. And I don't think that's a particularly, like, healthy thing. But a lot of entrepreneurs do have that. They have this little voice on their shoulder that's like, nudging them along, and that they need to break through some ceiling, or they need to, like, clear some hurdle. So I think there's probably a little bit of that. Maybe it's a youngest child thing. Maybe it's like a switched careers thing, and I need to prove that I can still do something in this new field. There's also the final part of that is that I do actually just really like nurturing things. I like growing things. I like seeing things, that I've shaped in some way, increase, grow, bear fruit in some way. So I really enjoy that. So those are my, there's more than one there, but those are my whys.
Assalamu alaikum. Can I come in?
Yeah, go ahead.
Thank you for sharing your thoughts. I found some of them very interesting. I hope I'm not too, I don't know, outlandish in asking, what does a day in your life typically look like? How do you manage your work-life balance?
That's a great question. So there's some stuff that we do that's a bit, like, unusual, which enables us to manage what we're doing, my wife and I, that is. So the first thing, and again, this is highly personal, but I'll just tell you my own experience. The first thing is that we actually live with my wife's parents. Now, that is an arrangement that, if you'd asked me a few years ago, I would have thought, wow, I would not expect to be doing that. There's the boomerang generation, like the kids that go back to their parents' house after university, but then there's I don't know what the analogy for a boomerang is, when you've got 3 kids of your own and you're rocking up, not in your own parents' house, but in your wife's parents' house. So there's a bit of that, like, which is a bit of an unusual thing. But what that enables us to do is, firstly, it enables me to do this job, which, as a startup, it's not the highest paid job from a cash perspective, unlike, say, if you took a job with a bigger company or whatever it may be, with steady career progression. So it enables us to basically be here in the first place. And then, just from a more, like, routine point of view, linked to that is that we do get some help with the children. So that takes some of the pressure off during the day. So it means that, a typical day for me would, especially this time of year, usually starts at about 5:30 in the morning. When I set my alarm, wake up, we'll do our morning prayers, and then we'll actually stay up. So we get a couple of hours before the kids wake up, because they usually get up at like 8 o'clock. And then those 2 to 3 hours for me at the moment, if work was extremely busy, some of that would maybe be work time, like half an hour to an hour. But at the moment, I use that time to learn or to write. So I usually have like a Udemy course that I'm just slowly working my way through, or I'm trying to write, blog, whatever it may be. Then I have just like a pretty typical working day. So I might get the kids ready between 8 and 9, feed them, whatnot. Then 9 to 5 is like a typical working day. I do try to exercise. So either it's on my bike, or it's I have these like exercise bands. There's like resistance bands. So I have those things. So I use those, and I have a little like chin-up bar that I put in the doorway. You can't see it on this doorway because it's virtual background, but it is hanging up there somewhere. And I do, so one day I'll do a bit of biking, one day I'll do the other thing with the bands. And then I usually stop at about 5:30, and then in my calendar I have this like block from 5:30 to 7:30 it won't take you too long to figure out just now that I'm in that protected time. Oh, thanks, Hamza. Sorry, my son's just kind of close the door. So 5:30 to 7:30 is like feeding and bedtime routine. And then I try not to work in the evening, but I'd be lying if I said I never worked in the evening. So maybe another hour or two in the evening. And I try and keep my weekends free. I'm in a fortunate position that I can do that at the moment.
Thank you for sharing.
No worries. And sleep early. That's the key. If you want to do that like morning thing, unless you're unusual and don't need too much sleep, then you do have to have the discipline to sleep early. And I've certainly tried staying up at night, and I've tried staying up in the morning. When you have a family, you also have to you can't be up all night and then, sleep in when everyone's up and needing you. So that's why if the kids sleep at 7:30 to 8 p.m., if I sleep at 9:30, then I can still wake up before them and I've rested enough.
Salam, Imran, if I can quickly touch upon something you said earlier about your chip on the shoulder. I guess looking externally, I'm quite surprised you said that actually, because looking at you kind of externally, I would have thought that I would consider you someone who's kind of made it in many ways, alhamdulillah. And it's interesting for you to hear that, because I feel like I have a similar thing, but I feel like I have like a lot less accomplishment. So I feel like maybe I can feel that way, but hearing someone as accomplished as you feeling that way is quite interesting. So I mean, what's the best way to deal with that?
It's kind of you to say that. I mean, I certainly don't think of myself in that way, but I can see I can see why you say that, but just before I answer the question, which is like, why is that, I think is your question. I spoke to a friend of mine yesterday. He sold his second startup, just like doubled or tripled his exit during his earnout period. So he said the same thing. He was said, I have a chip on my shoulder too. And I still have that hunger. Like, I still feel like I need to go and do something. The first 6 months after the acquisition, I felt like I was on cloud 9. And I suspect that everybody's a bit like that. And I think in other dimensions of life, they call it the hedonic treadmill or whatever. And we all sort of have our internal thermostat. And when our pain increases or our pleasure increases, after a while, we acclimate to the new environment, new circumstances. And then we sort of feel the same feeling. And I think that the only way to, why is that? I don't actually know. I think it's something about how we're probably hardwired. I'm sure that faith or transcendence, some transcendent framework like your faith or something is the only way to really crack that nut. So I think people are just wired a bit differently. I think some people are wired to be a bit more restless and to seek a bit of pain and to seek a bit of risk. I'm sure you can change your level set depending on who you spend time with, what you read, how you like your meditative practices and your reflection and all of that.
Thank you.
Jazakallah khair for sharing such an intimate presentation, Imran. I just had a question, just going back to the relationship aspect, right? So you mentioned about kind of creating a support network and kind of expanding your connections. So some of us, are probably early, at the very early stages of their kind of startup life. So they may feel like, they don't have much to offer. So you said about kind of a give and take relationship. So how do you go about kind of creating these meaningful relationships with people kind of, I guess, above your pay grade, as you may call it that, and then kind of nurturing, creating those relationships when you feel like maybe you don't have much you can offer them?
Yeah, I think that's a really good question. Before I give practical suggestions, I think one thing I'll say is that I think everybody forgets that the people that are senior to them or older than them or grayer than them, they forget that they face fundamentally the same struggles, no matter where they are in life. Yeah, that's one thing that's really important to I think really trick. If you have to trick yourself into believing that, then trick yourself. You need to believe it basically because it's true. I'll give you an example. I spoke to, about a month ago, I reached out to a guy. I was just not expecting him to reply to my message, but he was a McKinsey partner, founded a tech company that went public. I was chatting to him, and he's like, when I told him what I'm facing, which is if you told me what you were facing, it would be basically essentially the same kind of thing, some mixture of a bit of imposter syndrome, some a bit anxiety about the future, some uncertainty about what you want to achieve in life, a bit of restlessness from a chip on your shoulder, whatever it is, some cocktail of like human ailments that we all have. He had the same cocktail. He's got the same stuff that he's thinking about. And I was like flabbergasted. I was like, I asked him a question. How did you figure, like, how did you navigate all these decisions? He was like, you know what? I didn't actually. It just kind of happened. I faced all these struggles. I had all these problems. I left this organization for this reason, and that good thing happened there, and this hard thing happened here, and this personal loss I suffered, and like it's the same thing. So that person that you're looking to reach out to and thinking, what do I have to offer someone who has X, Y, and Z to their name? Their human condition is the same. I really believe that. Like very, very few people escape that. And so how do you connect with people? I believe that we are in a time now of like permissionless relationships and permissionless like interaction or opportunity. And what I mean by permissionless is that implicit in your question to me is I need to have gained some experience to be worthy of that interaction, to be worthy to offer something to this person. So basically what's implicit there is some permission, right? Some in other realms, it's like with people with their careers, I don't have a MBA, therefore I can't apply to that job. I don't do, we tell ourselves these types of things. Sometimes they're true, sometimes they're not true. I mean, they can often imagined, and in some disciplines, there's some real stuff like law and medicine, you need certain credentials, but mostly this is like a figment of our imagination. So if you adopt a permissionless approach, your kind of starting position is that, hey, I live in a time where I can contact anyone. I can tweet Jack Dorsey. I can DM, I can find Reid Hoffman's email address on the internet. I can, go knock on, the Index Ventures like office in London and just like hang out in reception until one of the partners comes out and speaks to me. Like you can do all of this stuff. Like we live in an age where this is possible. And when you're reaching out to people, I would just think like, what can I do to actually help this person? They will need help, right? Everyone needs help. Everyone needs other people. No one is above that. So when you think, what can I do to help them? Like, first of all, I can be a friend. I can be a supporter. Everybody needs a bit of support every now and then, even if they are, Emma Raducanu, who looks like she's unstoppable. She gets up on the stage and says, thanks, mom and dad. You believed in me when I couldn't breathe. Everybody needs support, right? So you offer them some support. You say something that if you're really interested in that person, take the time to actually learn something about them, what they care about, what they do, and give them something. Say, I found this report was really good, and I like pulled out the 3 figures that I think you should look at. You may have already seen it, but just DM them the 3 figures and say, sorry, I really so no children were harmed in the production of this workshop, I hope. I can't actually tell because it's around the corner. So just like do something to like help them, and you got nothing to lose. Like, what's the worst case scenario? The worst case scenario is they don't reply, right? What have you lost? You would have probably spent that time agonizing about what to do anyway. So just do something useful and send it to someone. And it's like, it reminds me of this idea that Nassim Taleb talks about with investments and equity and like thinking long-term, which is about taking asymmetric bets, which is basically doing something, rolling the dice, where like you send an email to someone, you knock on someone's door, you apply for something, you call someone. If it doesn't work out, the downside is like you just spent half an hour, maybe you spent a day. The upside is that that thing leads to a conversation, and that conversation leads to another thing, and before you know it, you got more than you bargained for. So that's an asymmetric bet. It's called an asymmetric bet because the upside is very high and the downside is capped. It's a bit like anyone here who publishes blog. I publish a blog post every now and then, and I shamelessly plugged my website earlier. But when you blog, when you hit publish, it's really like nerve-wracking, right? Because you don't know someone's going to read it or not. It's embarrassing when it goes onto your Twitter feed and it's got like 1 like from your mom. You know, it's like that's the kind of thing that it's like an example of the same thing. But you know, maybe Tahsin reads it, right? Then maybe Tahsin like thinks, damn, I'm gonna go join that company, and like I've got a kid and I don't know how I'm gonna survive. Let me call this guy. So he calls me and then we have a conversation. Then he's like, oh, by the way, we're thinking about an accelerator. I'm like, I don't know anything about accelerators, but I was in one. So why don't we have another conversation? Then we have a conversation. Before I know it, I'm here and I've made like another 10 friends and I've got free therapy. If I went to a therapist, they'd charge me £200 to talk to them about my problems. But I get to come here and like, you know, have this interesting conversation. I'm being a little bit tongue in cheek now, but the point is that like, that's how it starts, right? You take a gamble, you put something out there, something happens, there's a connection that forms. And that's a true story, actually. I think that's pretty much like how we connected. So you always have something to offer. Everybody's struggling. It's like, it reminds me of Surah Al-Asr, you know, sorry to like get all, you know, like pious and stuff. But, you know, Surah Asr, if you read the translation of Surah Asr, it's like, basically everyone is just in a state of, everyone's struggling, man. Everyone is struggling. Just like help people, offer to help people, offer to support them. Be patient, you know, like if things don't work out, keep trying. You know, it's just like that. That's the best answer I think I can give in this context.
Thanks for that. And just a follow up on that, actually. So no, thanks for sharing those tips. So do you have like a system or a process? So just going back to your framework that you just showed us earlier. So do you have a system or a process that you follow in terms of like making meeting new people and then kind of, I don't know, managing your old relationships or the ones that you have created?
Yeah, I have a loose system. So I'll tell you what that is. So I have a page in Notion, and it's a table, and I use it as a CRM. Not as a CRM because I don't put content in it, but I use it to set reminders of like to reach out to certain people. So let's say that I know something is going to happen, like I want to start a company, or I'm going to need to fundraise. So I think if I'm going to fundraise, I should speak to people that have fundraised. I should speak to some investors. I need to like build these relationships. So what I'll do is I'll just like identify people from my network or my friends' friends, and then I'll list their names, and then I'll just like email them. So I'll just go through maybe one by one. Sometimes it's the same email. I'm sending a slightly modified version to each person. And then Notion has a very simple function that many software programs have, where you can set reminders. So I just set a reminder to reach out to them in 3 months' time again. And then all that happens is that I use Notion. There's one specific thing I do. You know, have you guys heard of the concept of a litany or a wird? I think it's called in Arabic, in English they call it a litany. It's like a routine that you follow, something that you read, or something that you maybe part of your worship or something. And people have like journaling and mindfulness. So I have a litany in the morning that I read, which is about my work. So I say things to like counter imposter syndrome, or I literally just read them out to myself, like, you know, the process, the product is a result of the process. If you're not where you are in life, look at your process. You know, support your wife to continue to be the person that you fell in love with by helping her do the things that she loves to do. So, you know, she doesn't, you know, so that she stays that person that you fell in love with a long time ago. You know, like those types of things that I try to remind myself. I read them every morning. So that's in Notion. So my day starts with Notion. So go into Notion. And then if I've got this reminder that I need to contact someone, I see it as a notification. So I click the notification, and then I have like I think on a Friday morning, I have a 1 hour blocked out before 9 where I like email people according to the people that I have like time has elapsed and I need to reach out to them. And then there's also things just like good manners, you know, like if you, there's actually a very good article called I think it's on First Round Capital, and I haven't linked it in here, but it's like how to be insanely well connected. I think you can Google it. And the guy in there, it's just good manners. He basically says like, if you're gonna speak to someone, follow up afterwards. And these days, when you have like a delayed send in your email, it's very easy to do that. You can just write it there and then, and you can send the like, 3 days later, really appreciated that time. Thank you so much. I took some important takeaways from the meeting, including whatever. I'll reach out to you, in about 3 months' time to let you know how I'm getting on. So like, these are just good manners, right? Like closing the loop with people. If you're going to follow through, thanking people, ending a conversation in a very enthusiastic way, so that the next time you meet that someone, the like heat at the end of the conversation is where you start, that people feel, yeah, that last conversation was really great. I got a good feeling going to this next one. So these types of things, like, there's many recipes out there. The key thing is consistency. Just try something that works.
Jazakallah khair for that.
Barakallah feen. There's like teenagers out there now that have like 30,000 Twitter followers and stuff. Like, you're asking the wrong person. So, at the end of the day, like I'm a student of all of this.
Thank you, Imran. That was a very, very insightful hour. If anyone doesn't have any questions, I know it's 7:30 now. Just take your permission, Imran, maybe one or two more.
Yeah, sure.
there
It's
are
absolutely fine. Yeah, I'm okay. I'm okay until 8 o'clock, I think. Obviously.
Okay. So if there are any more questions, please do feel free to ask. I think Alamin's question about feeling like you don't have the permission to reach out to people who are more senior than you, I think resonated with all of us. I was about to raise my hand and ask exactly that same question. And even though you've just sort of tried to remedy that with your answer, I still feel like it's very tough. And one thing that sort of helps me overcome that is just thinking about people who react to me and how I have never any problem with just responding and just pretending that other people feel the same way. I don't know if that helps at all, but that sort of does allow me to build up the courage sometimes to just send a message, because I just assume they feel the same way as I do when someone reaches out, which is a bit flattered.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's it. That is, basically it, right? Like everybody is ultimately human at the end of the day, and there's still an art to sending a good message, I'm sure. But yeah, I think trying is, I read something once, which I think is true, which is that like the people that do well in life have swung and missed more times than you've swung. So if you don't take the swing for the ball, you're never going to hit it. So the people that get ahead have missed the ball so many times, but they just keep swinging.
Yeah. Yeah, even on that as well. I've got a question to ask as well, but just even on that, when initially starting being developers for the first hackathon, I actually just messaged about 100 people on LinkedIn to say, listen, I'm doing this hackathon. Is anyone interested? And only about 20 or so people responded. But still, those first 20 who came, it was a really great experience. Purely, again, just from reaching out LinkedIn. I've actually done it quite a few times, and like Tassin mentioned, quite a few people do it to me as well. And I was thinking in life, if you give, you'll eventually get back as well, which is good, alhamdulillah. Imran, my question is specifically regarding family. If you naturally, because for a lot of us, we've got full-time jobs currently right now. Either we have community projects on the side or startups and all of this stuff, as well as that we're trying to live a fun life at the same time as well. Naturally, through your experience, did you ever feel as though one kind of thing in one aspect of your life was a little bit lacking? Because for me, with the biggest complaint that I get from family is that I don't spend enough time with them. So is there any advice you can maybe give around that, or anything you've basically found that is helpful, or any kind of routines or anything like this that you set up?
Yeah, it's a really good question. I think you can use like tools and routines to help you implement your chosen balance. Like, let's say, this might sound terrible, but like, let's say there's a beloved family member that you need to call every day. You could set an alarm on your phone that goes off, and they might get a bit suspicious because 7:30 p.m. every day they get a call or a text. But you can do things. Obviously, you can use tools. You can use the software and the everything we have. But I think ultimately, at some level, first of all, it's very hard, right? That's the thing to say. Like, if you want to be like a mind, body, soul type person where you're, smashing it at work and you're like running marathons every day and you're, like building, like healing the family in the evenings and all of that, right? Like, that's really hard. It's really, really hard. And everybody is would struggle to do that. So I think ultimately you have to pick. You probably do have to pick and make some trade-offs. My one trade-off I had in an earlier stage of my life when I was consulting is that I used I used to have more like a sprinting schedule then. This is before remote work and everything that's changed, because the world has now changed again, right? But before I used to travel, so I would be very, very busy, and then I would have time off. So I made sure like I had time off between projects, and in that time I would like take the family away even for just a weekend, or really immerse myself in family stuff to make sure that I had rest and recuperation. And I actually also took like unpaid leave. Some companies offer unpaid leave, so I doubled my holiday allowance. They were quite flexible with that, but I sacrificed money for that. So these types of things you can do, but ultimately you have to make trade-offs. I don't think you can always like have it all if you've got competing interests. That's not a great answer to your question. I'm actually, if there's anyone else in the audience that can comment on that, I'd love to hear. But I think that's the best I can come up with, which is like you have to make conscious trade-offs and find something that works. And when you've got family, it's even more difficult because you have to make those trade-offs together with other people. Like you have to include them in the decision making. One last thing I'll tell you that people found very strange at McKinsey is that I started to take international projects after we had a baby, and I took my family with me. I stayed in Copenhagen for 3 months, stayed in Atlanta for 2 months. Like, you know, that's hard because you're away from home, but it meant that I could work long hours. I had no commuting. I had no flying. I was like, wife and kid were nearby. So, you know, just, I guess, be creative and ask people like, how did you solve this? You might get an idea. Ask your partner, ask your parents, your family, whoever you have commitments with. Pick your poison.
Yeah. No, Jazakallah khair. I appreciate it.
It's useful to have a sense of what your non-negotiables are. I think that's helpful. So as you're making those trade-offs, have a sense of like, if there are certain things that are not negotiable, what are those? You might have to bend those occasionally.
Yeah. No, Jazakallah khair for your answer.
I have a
Imran, to
question.
answer that question as well, something that you said yourself to me
Yeah.
when we first spoke, if I can just piggyback off your own answer, was about just being very, very honest and giving a lot of visibility to the stakeholders involved as to what's going on in the rest of your life. You know how you, for example, took family with you to that first retreat, just so they can see that the people you're working with are just a bit overexcited nerds and not anyone malicious or anything like that. You mentioned that helped a lot. Maybe that's something worth mentioning.
Yeah. So I think what Tahsin's saying is that like when I first joined that consulting company, they had like an onboarding 2-week like training program in another country. I think it's Austria. And like you're not allowed to bring family. It says all over the thing. It's like in a hotel, like no family, no friends allowed to stay in your room, blah, blah, blah. And my wife was expecting. So I said, look, you know, my wife is expecting and like, I need to bring my wife. And they were like, you know, we have this rule. I'm like, no, please, can you reconsider? Like she's expecting. I'll be very, very stressed if I'm there and she's not with me. I was, you know, maybe in hindsight, maybe I was very stressed. I don't know, but like, I certainly made them feel I would be very stressed. And eventually they were like, yeah, okay, sure, bring her. And she stayed in my room. And so like we had 2 to 3 weeks training. And, you know, she met all of my friends and like a lot of people, they weren't friends at the stage. I was just meeting them. And then she also got like to know what the work is like who are the people that you work with? Why do you have to travel so much? Why is it such long hours and so on? So she kind of like was learning that with me. So I then had a lot more support, I think, from my wife at times where I really needed it, you know, to be away a bit more. And we found other flexible solutions, like her parents would be present when I was absent at times. So, and also when I was there, you know, just to provide a bit more support. So just talking about these things with the people, with your colleagues, with your family, trying to be constructive. And they can be difficult conversations, though, I think it should be said. Lavina, were you going to ask something?
I was just going to go back to your point number 2 of relationships.
Yeah.
Who were your key people throughout your journey?
That is a good question. So do you mean like the startup journey in particular?
Yeah.
Okay. So it's changed over time. So the ones that have been consistent, I think I've leaned a lot on family. So I became quite introverted during the startup because the company and the family, for me, just those two things alone was like, if I could do that, then that was my like non-negotiable. So spend time with my family, like for me, that's, you know, have dinner at home as much as possible, make sure I can be there around bedtime, that sort of thing. So that was, you know, that's my wife. It's my parents, but also particularly my wife's parents actually have become developed a good friendship and bond with, as they used to live with us at times when I was away. And then now that I started the startup, you know, we've actually moved in with them to get support. So they've been a constant source of support, and they actually don't know anything. You know, like, you know, Twitter is like a echo chamber. Like they don't have any idea. They don't even know what Twitter is, right? They think it's like an insult. If you call someone a Twitter, like that's probably what they'd say. So they're just not in that scene. Whatever that scene is, we're like, you know, minority views, very loud. Like, so for me, it's very refreshing. I just go and talk to them. They're just like very grounded people. I think they've been another big one. Then one of our investors has been a great source of support, board member. His name is Ben. Spoken to him a lot along the way. And then I have a small group of like 3 to 5 other founders. The funny thing is that, you know, everything you guys said about like people that are older than you and not knowing how to reach them. So these people are younger than me, all of them, very talented, probably in their mid to late 20s. When I look at them, I'm like, oh, they went straight into entrepreneurship. One of them dropped out of medicine, went into entrepreneurship. A lot of them didn't like take as many scenic turns as I did along the way. So I really look up to them and their like clarity of their, you know, focus and all of that. And I asked them for help and support. And some of them over the years, like some of them maybe were not as responsive, and others were like very happy to give help, and they've asked questions back, and we've become friends, and we support each other. So I think over the last 12 months, that's been a key one. So yeah, I don't know if that answers your question. It's like a little bit of family and then a little bit of like peers in my professional space.
Nice. I think I like hearing people's stories of their journey.
That's it. That's right. I think it's makes you realize that, like, you know, normalizes your experiences a bit, doesn't it?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Glad to
Thank you,
hear.
man. I don't want to take all of your time. I know we've taken your time out from family, and we really enjoyed that. It was very personal, very honest. I think it resonated with all of us. So we really, really appreciate your time. I lost track of time. I just realized it's Maghrib, so I think we should perhaps close. Again, on behalf of everyone, I'm sure, thank you very much for your time. We'll be sharing the recording as well. Next week, we actually have Shazad from Nuzmatch, so he'll be joining us on Monday, so he'll be sharing his journey. So look forward to that. One thing quickly to mention to the cohort and those listening on the recording, if you do want to do any user testing with our community, please let us know. We have around 700 plus people there, and so we can help arrange that in the best and most appropriate way. So just reach out if you want to test a particular feature or anything like that you've been working on last week or two, myself or Ibrahim, either of us, and we'll arrange something, inshallah. Otherwise, any other questions, I'm sure you can reach out to Imran. His website is imranmahmud.com. It'll be on the slides. We'll share that with you too. And he's on the Slack, so you're welcome to reach out. There's a Calendly link. Imran will share the right one. And we'll go from there, inshallah. So any final comments from you, Imran, before we close?
No, I just I really appreciate the, you know, it's a real privilege to like have the opportunity to speak to you all and to meet with you. I think, you know, what you're doing is really brave. It's really courageous, and it's the like engine room of like how our economy and our lives progress. It's what entrepreneurs and innovators do. So I'm really thrilled for you all, and I think I pray for your like every success, and anything that I can do to help, you know, at any time, let me know, and I'd be delighted to hear from you. And yeah, I hope I can continue to learn from you all for the rest of the program.
Perfect. Thank you so much. We'll close here and hopefully see you all soon. Take care. Assalamu alaikum.
Take care.
Thank you.
Bye.